Welcome on in, everybody, here to the Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is December 3rd, another week down in the NFL. We're going to recap it all here for you guys on today's show. We're going to start off with Monday Night Football, concluding officially Week 13 in the NFL. A not-so-anticipated game turned into a highly watched game there towards the end between the Broncos and the Cleveland Browns, so we're going to break all of that down to start today's show. Also, the news came in on Houston linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair. He received a suspension by the NFL for that hit on Trevor Lawrence. We're going to get into that and whether or not we agree on it, plus some more reactions to a lot of the games over the weekend that we didn't get to cover yesterday, like the Falcons game, the Vikings game, and the Steelers game as well. All of that is coming to you guys on today's show. But before we get to our first topic, I'd like to remind you guys and give you guys the opportunity, really, to get involved with our show. If you got any questions, comments, any opinions you'd like to share during these live shows, please don't hesitate to do so regarding anything on the NFL or maybe just any other question you might have. Please, again, don't be afraid to share your insights and any input you'd like to share during the live shows. It's always a great opportunity for you guys to do that, but to also get a different perspective on anything we're talking about. And if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on today's show and any of the other live shows, there's an easy way to do that just by using the Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate it every time you guys are able to get involved or just share your opinions on anything. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Again, get involved with the show, get involved with the program, use the Super Chat feature, and just let us know what's on your mind when we're talking about the NFL or a bunch of these topics around the games and just around the NFL in general. So we are now able to move on to the first segment that I have here for you guys, looking at the Broncos and Browns game. Monday Night Football last night, right? Had pretty much everything you could have asked for in a game. We had a lot of big plays, turnovers, quarterbacks putting up big numbers, a lot of touchdowns, obviously, to follow that, and career performances, history being made, and all that sort of thing in a game where you might have looked at it and it might not have been the most anticipated game or the highly sought after game, but you know, that all went out the window, right? Pretty early in this game. So that was at least a pleasant surprise for anybody that tuned in from the start and stayed with it throughout the end of this game. But it all eventually led to the Broncos defeating the Cleveland Browns 41-32. Thankfully, our prediction came through because we did pick the Broncos to win this game. And it was really their defense, the most reliable part, the most, I think, established part of their team, I would say, making the difference at the end, right? The score doesn't really suggest a defensive matchup, but looking at this game and how it played out, it was really those two pick sixes, obviously, and that interception there at the end that created that separation between the Broncos and the Cleveland Browns in this game. So their defense coming through with them in a very different way this time around. Then you look at what this win does for the Denver Broncos. It moves them to 8-5, and going into their bye week now, according to NFL.com, the Broncos now have a 76% chance to make the playoffs, which would make it the first time that they'd be in the playoffs since 2015. It's been almost 10 years since the Broncos were in the latter stages of the NFL season. Last time they were there, their quarterback was Peyton Manning, so it's obviously been a long time, right? Not only being and getting to the playoffs, but also having a quarterback that's able to get you there. And Bo Nix, we're going to get to him and how well he played, but it wasn't just all about the Broncos getting to the playoffs. It also kind of had to do with them because their former wide receiver, Jerry Jeudy, returned to face his former team after the trade went down in March, I believe, that sent Jerry Jeudy over to the Cleveland Browns. They gave him a nice 3-year deal, and he had an opportunity here to stick it to his team, to his former team, now in his former home. And boy, did he ever, because he recorded a career-high 235 receiving yards, which was a career high for him, obviously, and also the most receiving yards by a former receiver against his former team in NFL history. He surpassed Terrell Owens, who had that record, but now it belongs to Jerry Jeudy. And he also tacked on 9 receptions and a touchdown as well. So it was a very historical moment for Jerry Jeudy. Obviously, playing against your former team, you have that added motivation. So he did everything he could have to not only stick it to his former team, but have a contribution to a winning effort. Unfortunately, they didn't win, but I'm sure that part definitely felt good. But he wasn't the only one on the Browns to make some sort of history. Along with him, Jameis Winston threw for 497 yards just alone in that game yesterday. Nearly 500 yards just coming in a single night game for Jameis Winston is insane. With that, he sets the franchise record for the Cleveland Browns at 497 yards, passing yards, in a single game. I believe it was last held by Josh McCown, but, Jameis Winston blew that out of the water yesterday with also 4 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions, 2 of which were returned for pick sixes. And along with those performances, right, we mentioned Jameis Winston, Jerry Jeudy. The running game really was just thrown out the window. The leading rusher was Jerome Ford with 41 rushing yards. Nick Chubb also had the same amount of carries at 9, but he only recorded 21 rushing yards going up against that Denver defense. And outside of Jerry Jeudy, who had 9 receptions, 235 yards and whatnot, Elijah Moore also contributed with 111 yards and 8 receptions, and David Njoku also had 9 receptions, 452, but he added 2 touchdowns as well. But on the other side, I mentioned Bo Nix, and he had a touchdown. He did record 2 interceptions, which made the game pretty close there in the second half, but he almost also had 300 passing yards. He was 6 yards short of that. And in the passing game, it was Marvin Mims scoring a really impressive touchdown. More so the throw was impressive, but, just the 93, 92-yard touchdown in it of itself was very impressive by Marvin Mims. Cortland Sutton did his thing. He had 6 receptions for 102 yards. And Jaleel McLaughlin, he had 14 carries for 84 yards. So they definitely got more of a balanced effort from their offense, more so than the Cleveland Browns did. But overall, you look at how this game played out. It was 10-14 in the first half with about 4 minutes left when we saw one of the first big plays happen. The first big play in this game, I was watching this game while I was doing some other work, and just out of nowhere, it was going kind of like how you'd expect it to. Low scoring, not either team not really doing too much to kind of separate themselves, but then just out of nowhere, Nick Bonito comes in out of nowhere. Jameis Winston has no idea he's even there or that he's looking at the guy that Jameis wants to throw to. Nick Bonito just comes up behind him, takes the ball away, and returns it 71 yards for the first pick six that extends Denver's lead to 10-21 going into halftime. But Cleveland were able to get it back right before halftime, so it was still a 4-point deficit, but it was 17-21 in favor of the Broncos going into halftime. Then, as the second half started, we had, like I mentioned, Marvin Mims, 93-yard touchdown. Then right after that, the fireworks really started to set off because we had that 93-yard touchdown. Then one play later, we had Jerry Jeudy score that 70-yard touchdown. And now we're in the 20s. Now we're in the high 20s, right? It's 25-28 after the Browns convert on a 2-point conversion. So now they're only down 3 points instead of 4. Then later in the back end of the fourth quarter, after Nick Chubb scores a touchdown, the Cleveland Browns are able to go up 32-31 after also the Broncos tack on a field goal. But still, the Browns are up at this point. It's their first lead in the game, and you're thinking maybe they could pull it off here. But Denver managed to get another field goal to get up 32-34, And Cleveland, even still at 32-34, with all the momentum and all the unexpectedness of this game, they had more than enough time to go down and get a field goal. But unfortunately, Jameis Winston threw his second pick six to McMillan, and he returned it, obviously, and now the score is 32-41. And they did add a field goal, if I am correct. No, they didn't. That was all their points they got, but still, it was a 9-point game at that point. And after that pick six, after the demoralization of that, and the fact that you're down 2 scores now, it's almost impossible. But Winston almost had that opportunity to kind of get back into the game. There was a chance there at the end, but ultimately he almost had a third pick six when he tried to throw it into the end zone, but Cody Barton did intercept it, but Jerry Jeudy caught up to him in the end. So a lot of crazy plays in this game. One, I guess just for the Denver Broncos, from an overall perspective of what we can take away from this game, I thought Bo Nix, despite the 2 interceptions, I thought he did a great job of just keeping up with Jameis Winston and just how outrageous of a pace this game was being played at, with how fast everything was happening, the 93-yard touchdown, then a 70-yard touchdown, pick sixes, and still it's only like a 3 or 4 point game. I thought Bo Nix and really the entire offense did a good job of kind of staying composed and keeping everything stable, not just favoring the passing game in this game when it was very easy to. So, the Broncos are a better team than the Browns, at least this year, so you kind of expect that out of them, despite even a rookie quarterback. So I thought they did a very good job of executing that and just kind of remaining on course. And then for the Browns, they are just trying to play spoiler. Jameis Winston's a gunslinger. He really just throws caution to the wind. He's the perfect example of that. But the more I watch him play, the more it kind of just makes me think that he's not like the old Jameis Winston that, leads the league in passing touchdowns or leads the league in passing yards, but has like 30 interceptions. I don't think he's that guy anymore. I know the pick sixes say a different thing, but the more I watch him, I feel like he could be a starting quarterback somewhere. And if that's going to be for the Browns, that would be crazy because Deshaun Watson, what's going to go on with him is a whole different discussion. But I feel like he has kind of earned the opportunity to be a starter somewhere else. And there's plenty of teams that are going to need quarterbacks, maybe even a bridge guy or a guy still on a 1-year deal. But everyone's not going to be able to get Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, right? So I think Jameis Winston's kind of played himself into that conversation, into a 1-2-year contract. And I would like to see him, get another opportunity to really be considered the starter in one of the many organizations that are going to be looking for quarterbacks. So they might not be playing for anything as a team, big picture-wise, but I think I've taken a lot from this and Jameis Winston that he's filled me with a lot of confidence that I think he definitely deserves the opportunity to be starting somewhere. If it's the Browns, that's great. If not, hopefully he can find another home around the NFL. But the game overall was super entertaining, obviously, but we're going to leave that there, and in the meantime, we're going to go to a quick break here, and when we return, we're going to talk about the breaking news that we had today from the NFL regarding Azeez Al-Shaair, a Texans linebacker who had a very scary hit on Trevor Lawrence this past weekend. Pandemonium broke out, obviously, in that game, and there was a suspension that was supposed to come down, and finally, we got the news on that, so we're going to discuss it, give our thoughts on it, and just break down everything that has come after that hit. So we'll be right back. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing bullshit shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast here on December the 3rd, and with all the action that occurred over the weekend, I wasn't planning on talking about the Texans and the Jaguars game for kind of obvious reasons. You know, the Jaguars aren't really in it that much, but Houston did win the game 23-20, but the win was pretty much overshadowed by the moment that we had between Azeez Al-Shaair, a Texans linebacker, and Trevor Lawrence, right? A hit by Azeez Al-Shaair, a late hit on Trevor Lawrence that knocked Trevor Lawrence, you know, not unconscious, but he hit him pretty hard to the head. I'm sure you guys have seen it, at least by this point now, if you guys have seen it on social media or anything. Azeez Al-Shaair had a late hit on Trevor Lawrence, leaving him on the ground for several minutes, and obviously he was taken out of the game. He didn't come back, but after he did apply that hit to him, you know, everything, you know, just went out the window. You know, there was fights. Evan Ingram came in, and that was really the beginning of the initial fight, right, where everybody jumped on Azeez Al-Shaair defending their quarterback, right? How it usually goes, right? How you expect it to go. But right after that, obviously, with all the Jaguars players, you know, defending their quarterback and things like that, Azeez Al-Shaair, just based on the nature of the hit, he was obviously going to get ejected from the game, and he was ejected, but then like a smaller confrontation broke out in the end zone as he was trying to leave, and that all kind of was going on for a bit longer until he finally left the field, right? And because of how explicit it looked, and the fact that, you know, it left Trevor in that that kind of scary fencing position when you do get hit hard in the head, the nature of that, you obviously anticipated a suspension, a fine of some sorts coming down on Azeez Al-Shaair, and I didn't think it would come this quickly, honestly. I didn't think it would come today, but as I was, you know, going through some stuff in the morning, I saw that the NFL officially placed a 3-game suspension on the Houston Texans linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair for that hit on Trevor Lawrence, and it was actually NFL Vice President of Football Operations Jon Runyan who issued the suspension and made a public announcement. To spare you guys the time, I didn't have the whole announcement, but I did just take the main points from it, you know, as to why he decided, and I'm sure a couple other people obviously decided, that 3 games was the appropriate length of a punishment for Azeez Al-Shaair. And those points that were made in Jon Runyan's statement were the fact that he delivered a forceful blow to the head and neck area of the quarterback when he had time and space to avoid it. And I agree with that part, based on what Jon Runyan was saying as one of the main points. So I do agree on that. That part seems fair. He also cited the confrontation after the ejection, right? Kind of not letting it go right after the whole big fight ended. Continuing it afterwards also wasn't a great look. So, you know, that does make sense. And he also, in his words, cited multiple offenses for personal fouls and sportsmanship-related rules violations in recent seasons, as also another reason why Azeez Al-Shaair got 3 games instead of maybe 1 or 2 or something like that. He alludes to the fact that it has happened before, the history with Azeez Al-Shaair, and previous experiences. You know, I think it was in week 2 this year when the Texans played the Chicago Bears. There was an incident on the Bears sideline, I believe, and you basically saw Al-Shaair get up and punch Bears running back Rashad Johnson during that confrontation, and he got like an $11,000 fine for that. I'm pretty sure he didn't get suspended, but he got a fine for that, and they were obviously taking that into account, and I'm sure maybe they looked into it a lot deeper than I did and found other instances of maybe unsportsmanlike related rule violations, as they put it, but that was really the one that jumped out at me just from this year. And they cited that, the history of this player not being an unusual thing to happen related to Al-Shaair. So all of that was taken into account, and that's how they got to the 3 games and suspending him for that amount of time. And yesterday, with everything still pretty fresh, Azeez Al-Shaair did apologize to Trevor Lawrence for the hit, and Trevor Lawrence also did give an update saying that he was fine and everything, and he obviously thanked everybody for the well wishes and things like that. Doug Peterson spoke after the game. D'Amico Ryan spoke after the game, and before I get into D'Amico Ryans, because he said something pretty interesting that really relates to this entire thing, I do want to say that I do agree with the suspension, just in my initial thoughts on it. At first, when I saw it, I thought, like, it was one of the worst hits. It's one of the worst hits, not in, like, the case of, like, oh my god, that was, like, so dirty, like that player, that hit was the worst thing you could ever do in a football field. Not in that context, just like in the context of, like, when a quarterback is sliding, the last thing you want to do is kind of leave your feet and kind of just like launch yourself at him head first and things like that. I felt like that was the perfect example of what not to do in those situations. So when I saw it like that in actual speed, I thought, like, they're going to suspend him for a good amount of time. And then I heard some people say maybe 2 games, 1 game, and I'm thinking it's not going to be that bad. But when it actually turned out to be 3 games, I was pretty surprised that they actually went to that length. And according to other reports, Azeez Al-Shaair is going to appeal the suspension, maybe trying to get it reduced to, obviously, 2 games or 1 game. But, yeah, I mean, the 3-game suspension, I think, is fair, and it's also something that I think, just based on who he is and how animated he is, I don't know his character, obviously, but he feels like a very animated, very in-your-face kind of guy. Not to question his character, again, but he just appears like that from an outsider's perspective. So they obviously looked further into it, and they felt like this was appropriate, so I find it kind of hard that it would be reduced because, again, this is the last thing the NFL wants to happen, is see one of their stars go down like that. So I don't have high hopes that it's going to get reduced, but, Al-Shaair is still gonna appeal it. So the biggest thing about it, though, was the fact that he kind of did leave his feet, and the fact that he kind of led also with the forearm. You could make an argument that he, is kind of bracing himself, jumping like that, and it's kind of like a natural reaction to lead and kind of protect your face like that, but it just makes it look worse. And again, I think the most important fact that Jon Runyan made was that he delivered a forceful blow when he had time and space to avoid it, and some people might say that he didn't, that it was just like a bang-bang play, but if you kind of slow it down, like, Trevor is going down. It's not like he's kind of like stutter stepping or anything like that. He is going down as fast as possible for a guy that's like, what, 6'6", 6'7", or something like that, or 6'5". I don't know how tall he is, but he's going down as fast as he probably can. He's not like a shorter guy like Kyler Murray, so he's already going down. I thought that was pretty obvious. So the fact that it was just like a split second later that Al-Shaair kind of left his feet and jumped towards him, it obviously made this a lot worse. So I thought the suspension was fair. But D'Amico Ryans talked about it after the game as well, and he brought up an interesting point in, defending his guy and also their general manager today, Nick Caserio, I believe is his name, came to the defense of his player, obviously. But what D'Amico Ryans said after the game, I thought was super fascinating, because he said a lot of quarterbacks try to take advantage of the rule, and again, I'm paraphrasing. He said a lot of quarterbacks try to take advantage of the sliding rule, and in an effort to try and gain extra yards, they might kind of hesitate, like kind of feint that they're going to slide and then just get like a yard or 2 after, or, God forbid, they kind of make it look like they're trying to slide, the defender eases up, and then the last thing you also want as a defender is thinking that he's going to ease up. So you kind of let your guard down, and then the quarterback, and let alone like a huge quarterback like Josh or even Trevor or, any of those guys like Patrick or something like that, your guard is down. You think he's going to slide, and then he just drives his shoulder into your chest, and then you end up being hurt, right? And it doesn't seem fair. And I think that's what DeMeco Ryans was kind of getting after when he not only stood up for his player, but he also brought up the fact that the defenders are almost in like a lose-lose situation because they're pretty much at the mercy of what that quarterback is thinking, kind of predicting or assuming, that he's going to slide, but you truly don't really know. And again, I mentioned they're in a lose-lose situation, right? Because if they believe he's going to go down, they ease up, and then he doesn't, and then they give up like a first down or something like that, right? Or he is going down, and you don't know that, and you still go and hit him, and now you look like this reckless, unsafe player, right? It's not a good situation to be in for defenders, and I think that part is a little unfair, but again, I think that situation that DeMeco Ryans was talking about isn't really the same as this one because Trevor was, again, like I said, already going down, and the fact that Al-Shaair kind of almost completely left his feet to go and tackle him like that, that definitely makes it worse. But in a context like DeMeco Ryans was talking about and where I wanted to bring it, I think it is super interesting because, as a defender, you don't want to give up that crucial third down, right? So you're going to do everything possible to stop that quarterback, stop that runner from crossing the line. So it's a little unfair, I think, from that standpoint on defenders, right? That they're always, the bad guys in this situation. They also have to defend themselves too, right? They have as much right to defending that blade of grass, right? And not letting you cross it as the quarterbacks do, trying to get it as well. So I think that's the last thing you also want to happen as a defender, like I mentioned, right? Letting your guard down and then you end up getting hurt because you think the quarterback's going to slide and he doesn't, and you end up getting hurt on the other side of it. So that's also another thing that I would agree with DeMeco Ryans from that standpoint. And also I wanted to bring up that the reality of the NFL and how these suspensions go a lot of the times is, it's a quarterback league, right? Obviously, those are the biggest stars. Those are like the biggest attractions to the league, right? So not only are they always going to be favored, but I was thinking about it in a way like if you're a defender, like Al-Shaair, for example, right? Let's say they were playing like the Chiefs, right? If he makes that same hit or, a threatening hit like that on Patrick Mahomes, if the Chiefs lose Patrick Mahomes, it's obviously a lot bigger of a deal if the Chiefs lose Patrick Mahomes than the Houston Texans losing Azeez Al-Shaair. And it doesn't seem fair, but that's the value of the quarterback, and especially a guy like Patrick, and especially a guy like Trevor to the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? You can take it either way. Losing a quarterback in the bigger picture is a lot more impactful in reality when you really want to get honest about it than losing a linebacker like that. So that's why they make it so severe and so serious, right? Obviously, not just because it's a dangerous hit, you don't want to hit their heads and everything like that, but also you have to think about it that way. And that also just came into my head as I was talking about it as well. And also this spot is clearly on Al-Shaair. Again, I wanted to re-emphasize that because he did have the opportunity to stop himself, and it is tricky just because you don't really know where you go from here. What can quarterbacks do to make it a lot less likely that stuff like this happens again? Or even for defenders, right? How do they, adjust to this, right? If they don't really know what the quarterbacks are going to do. I think that is something that has to be revisited, obviously, because this is probably not the last time that it's going to happen. At least you could say that don't leave your feet like that. If you're going to try and meet him at that spot and you think he's going to slide, try your absolute best to stay on your feet and not kind of launch yourself forward. But I also do want to point out, again, in favor of the defenders, that if he dives head first, I think that's completely different from sliding, because when you slide, I think you're giving yourself up. But when you dive head first, like Josh Allen kind of did for a touchdown or something like that against the 49ers, I think that's different. I think if they're diving like that, I think the defender has just as much of a right, you could say, to also dive, and kind of prevent him from getting that first down, because you're not really giving yourself up at that point. You're really saying, I'm diving, trying to get this first down at any cost, right? You're not kind of saying, all right, I don't want to get hit, so I'm just going to go down, right? Two different sentiments with that. So I thought, what D'Amico Ryans said, a lot of people probably criticize it, but I thought there was some truth into what he was bringing up when he was talking about, the whole instance and, bringing it to a macro sort of point of view. So I thought that was interesting, but this hit was definitely pretty unique in that way. So I think 3 games was pretty fair from the NFL. But let me know what you guys think of this suspension. Do you guys think it was fair, or do you guys have a different viewpoint on it? Let me know in the comment section of any of the videos. But we are going to move on from that now and go into recapping more of the games. We're going to look at the Falcons and the Chargers game. A 4-interception performance from Kirk Cousins has risen up some doubts about Kirk Cousins. Maybe you're looking at Michael Penix a little bit, looking a little bit more intriguing, maybe to start. We're going to talk about all of that and just break down the game and what we saw from Kirk's performance as well as the Chargers when we return after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping back into the action now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast here, looking at more of the games from the weekend. I wanted to bring up the Chargers and the Falcons game because of not only the result, obviously, which was important for both of these teams, but obviously the performance of Kirk Cousins in this game, which was pretty alarming, right? You could say. Overall, the Falcons, for the 4th time this season, they faced an AFC team, and they still have no wins when they do play an AFC team, right? You look at the Chiefs, they lost that one. They lost to the Steelers. They lost to the Chargers now, obviously. And there is one more team in there that I am forgetting. It's the Steelers, it's the Chiefs, and it's also the Broncos. They got beat up pretty well by the Broncos. That's 4 teams from the AFC that the Falcons have had an opportunity to get a win from those results, but obviously haven't been able to do that. And the Chargers are just the latest example of that, right? They ended up losing 17-13 in this game. The loss is the 3rd straight loss for Atlanta in their recent games, and they now sit at 6-6 as an overall record, which may not seem awful because they are technically still in first place in their division, but when you combine it with the fact that the Buccaneers just won over the Carolina Panthers, and now the Bucs are back in contention for the division as well, also with a 6-6 record. The Falcons messed around a little bit. They lost, a few of these games in a row, and they've allowed the Buccaneers to have a good chance at winning this division, and even potentially missing out on the playoffs altogether, because the way the wild card looks right now in the NFC, if you don't have an actual good record, you're probably not going to get in on the NFC side, because you look at where everything stands right now. The Falcons are the 4 seed, just solely on the fact that they're leading their division, right? But if the Buccaneers overtake them, the Vikings are 10-2, the Packers are 9-3, and the Commanders are 8-5. So you are close with the Commanders, but if you lose another game, that's 4 games in a row you've lost, and you're kind of trending in the wrong direction at that point. So it's a tricky spot right now where the Falcons sit. But on the other side of things, the Chargers improved to 8-4. They rebound from the loss they had to the Baltimore Ravens last Monday night, and with a win and the fact that Baltimore also lost, the Chargers now jump back into the 5th spot in the playoffs, and Baltimore goes back down to the 6th seed, which is obviously important based on the matchups, right? The Ravens right now would be playing the Steelers, and the Chargers would be playing the Texans, and based on how the Texans have looked, that is probably a more favorable matchup. So obviously those matchups matter there, but the story with this game really was the Chargers defense coming up with 4 interceptions and really coming to the rescue of the team overall, because they were able to intercept Kirk Cousins 4 times in this game, and it really just wasn't all about like the Chargers defense and making these outstanding plays to get interceptions. A lot of these interceptions really didn't look great from Kirk Cousins, so there is that part of them actually catching it, right? It's a lot easier said than done, but again, Kirk and some of the decision making leaves you with a lot of worry, like I'm sure it does to a lot of Atlanta Falcons fans that have watched the games recently. So based on that performance, it was only the second 4 interception performance of Kirk Cousins' career. The other one was about 10 years ago when he was still in the Commanders and they were playing the New York Giants. And it hurts even more because of the fact that the Chargers offense only managed to have 9 points from 3 field goals they were able to get on the actual offensive side of the ball. The other points that they got was really only a pick 6 that they were able to get from their defense, obviously, right? Coming from one of the interceptions that Kirk Cousins threw. So other than that, the offense only scored 9 points, and especially with this defense that the Falcons have week in and week out, it hasn't been one of the top units. So whenever you can get a performance like this and hold the other team's opposing, offense to below 10 points, you think that you're almost going to win that game 10 times out of 10 times. So it hurts even more because of that reason, right? That you threw away a pretty good performance from your defense that was able to sack Justin Herbert, I believe, 5 times. Yeah, they sacked Justin Herbert 5 times in this game, and they were last in the NFL coming into this game with only recording 10 sacks on the year. And the fact that you got 5, half of what you got all season, and still lost, it's a very demoralizing loss. I think even more than the Broncos loss, because they got pretty beat up by the Broncos, losing by over 30 points or something like that, or 20 points. It looks worse, but I think this one was a lot worse because your defense played very well, and that's not something that they've done all year. And the fact that you still lost and you didn't take advantage of it, I think hurts a lot more. But overall in the game, we mentioned Kirk Cousins. He had those 4 interceptions. He threw for 245 yards, but no passing touchdowns. He was only sacked 1 time too, so it's not like he was, fighting for his life back there. A lot of the times he looked just panicked a little bit, and the lack of mobility, all of that sort of conversation starts to be brought back in. And also, Bijan Robinson had a nice day, 102 rushing yards and a touchdown. Drake London had 86 yards. Ray McLeod had 95 receiving yards. And Bijan contributed also with 33 receiving yards as well. Whereas the Chargers, we talked about their offensive performance and how it wasn't too promising. Justin Herbert only finished with 147 yards, and they really didn't get anything from their running game because J.K. Dobbins is out for the next, 3 or 4 weeks, and Gus Edwards was their leading rusher with only 32. Again, they somehow still won this game, and Ladd McConkey had a very good game. He had 9 receptions for 117 yards, and no other receiver had more than 2 for the Los Angeles Chargers. Again, these stats are pretty crazy to read off of, and I wanted to also bring up more of these stats because they are pretty mind-boggling when you compare them, side by side, team next to team, right? Starting off with the amount of first downs that each team got. The Chargers were able to get 10 first downs, and Atlanta was able to get 24 in this game, right? You keep going, and you look at the third down conversions by each team. Both of them got 3. So, just suggesting more of those struggles, right? But you keep going down the line and reading some more of these team stats, and you look at the fact that the Chargers had 187 total yards on the day compared to Atlanta's 350 on the day, rushing and receiving, right? So that's pretty insane that they still won this game. Then you look at the fact that Atlanta ran 31 more plays than the Chargers did, and again, it was all thrown away. The Chargers had 7 penalties while Atlanta had only 2. The Falcons also had over 10 more minutes of time of possession and still lost this game. And lastly, I mentioned the sacks and how they were able to sack Justin Herbert 5 times, coming in with a grand total of 10 on the year. You get about half of that in one game, and you can't really make it much more one-sided than it was. And it just emphasizes the point and the importance of those interceptions, obviously. And this was, again, arguably the best performance by this defense in Atlanta, only allowing 9 points. And it is pretty disappointing when you put it like that, especially when all of this leads to looking at Kirk Cousins and those turnovers and how costly they really were, right? Coming at points in the game where things didn't really start great with Atlanta missing a field goal, but they forced a fumble on the Los Angeles Chargers right after they missed that field goal, and that led to the only offensive touchdown in this game by Bijan Robinson. So the Falcons actually started off winning this game 7-0, but then once it was 7-3, Kirk Cousins threw his first interception to start the second quarter, and that one only led to a field goal. So not completely the end of the world, right? There's still the whole game to play, right? Then, after the Chargers added another field goal, they took the lead into halftime at 7-9. Still anyone's game pretty much, right? Not really much going on. Then, to start the second half, Atlanta had the lead back at 10-9 after a field goal, obviously, when Kirk threw the pick six. And not only that, but the Chargers converted on a 2-point try. So now the score is 17-10. And then from that point on, Atlanta got it to 13-17, but their final 2 drives ended with interceptions as well, including the worst one of all in the end zone where he just kind of floated it to I don't know who, and they intercepted it in the back of the end zone. So it is worrying. If I was to scale it, 1 to 10, I would probably say a 6 or a 7. The more people around, the Falcons and fans are going to start bringing up maybe the idea of Michael Penix, but I don't think I'm quite there yet. I don't think I'm quite there to just say, you know what, Kirk, hit the bench, dude. This is not working out because, one, you're paying him a lot of money, and you're still in first place, right? I think really that's what's holding it up right now. You have the head-to-head over Tampa Bay, so they have to actually have a better record than you, not just equal. So you do have that advantage. But, the lack of mobility is really looking like a problem. So I do understand that point. But my worry is not so, red panic button, right? Like, get Kirk out of here. I think he is still able to give you a lot of good things. The lack of mobility, again, is frustrating and is worrying. But, if this thing gets worse, and if they are in a spot where they could miss the playoffs, if, say they miss or lose the next 2 games, then I think you really have to throw caution to the wind at that point. But for right now, Tuesday after Week 13, I'm not ready to say, move on or anything like that. And, he has the best opportunity to kind of shut everybody up because this upcoming week, they're going to play his former team. They're going to play in Minnesota, and it's going to be a huge game. What better way to shut everybody up than beating your former team, especially when they're 10-2 right now. So that's going to be a massive game. And on the other side, if they lose it, though, the Buccaneers play the Raiders at home much less. So that's a good opportunity for the Bucs to be in first place in the division. So there's a lot riding on next week for Kirk and the Falcons, and they have good opportunities even still to kind of calm down all the nerves. So it's going to be a huge game for Kirk Cousins next week, but this one, definitely not one of his best performances. So we're going to move on from this one. We got two more to talk about on today's show. Speaking of the Vikings, they had an impressive win over the Arizona Cardinals, a 13-point comeback led by Sam Darnold. Shut a lot of people up around the doubts around Sam Darnold, so we're going to talk about that, how impressed we were with that, and our thoughts on the Arizona Cardinals too. Where do they stand in terms of getting into the playoffs? So we're going to come back with a couple more segments right after this.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here now on the show, and just kind of continuing on from where we left off in the last segment, we are going to be looking at the Minnesota Vikings and their impressive win over the Arizona Cardinals this past Sunday. Arizona was moments away, though, from rebounding from their previous loss to the Seattle Seahawks that knocked them out of the playoffs and out of that number one spot in the NFC West. But when it looked like they were about to win, Minnesota overcame a 13-point deficit to win 23-22 in the end for their fifth straight win of the season, or of this 5-game winning streak, I should say, not of the season. They are 10-2 right now in the fifth spot in the playoffs, and the victory for Minnesota keeps them on Detroit's heels as the number 5 seed and only one game behind the Detroit Lions for that number 1 overall seed, technically, and also the division title. Obviously, they still have one more game to play in Detroit, but still a head-to-head matchup to settle that. But also on the other side, Arizona drops to 6-6 and in 9th place right now in the playoff race. And the Buccaneers, with their latest, little win streak, they're able to jump over them as well. So they have an advantage over the Arizona Cardinals as well. And while it did take another late touchdown drive by Sam Darnold, Arizona had done enough, really, I thought, to steal this game. But they were really let down and harmed by their own mistakes, where on one team, you have Sam Darnold orchestrate this great late game comeback, 13-point deficit erased to win this game. You had the other quarterback on the other side, Kyler Murray, throw 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter, much less, and hurt their chances, I think. Not directly like the main reason why they lost, but when you do compare it like that, and, like I said, one quarterback leads a game-winning drive, and, Kyler Murray on the other side throws 2 interceptions, it doesn't look great, and a lot of people just gravitate directly to that, and it is disappointing, kind of like the Falcons loss. They got a good performance from their defense, much like the Cardinals. They sacked Sam Darnold 5 times in this game, and they recovered a fumble as well from Aaron Jones, and it looked like it was going to be enough, but, things fell apart there in the end. And despite, what we said on the 2 interceptions from Kyler Murray, he threw for 260 yards. James Conner had a better performance on the ground with 68 rushing yards, and Trey McBride had himself a day with 12 receptions for 96 receiving yards, and Marvin Harrison scored the only receiving touchdown as well in this game. And on the other side, for Sam Darnold. 235 yards, 2 touchdowns, a quarterback rating of 111. Rushing, not really much to speak of. Sam Darnold, Cam Akers, and Aaron Jones all finished individually with 22, which is pretty remarkable. But not really much coming from the rushing game. Justin Jefferson led all receivers with 99 yards, and Johnny Munt was the only receiver to score a receiving touchdown, and then Aaron Jones got himself a receiving touchdown as well. But the game was pretty shaky to start for Minnesota because Aaron Jones fumbled on each of Minnesota's first 2 drives. They recovered one of them, but they lost the other. And then, other than, that and an Arizona missed field goal, there was 5 field goals between both of these teams in the first half. And so the score was 9-6 going into halftime, obviously. Then, after that, Minnesota missed their own field goal to start the second half, and it allowed Arizona to build that lead, right, that 13-point deficit from this point on. Once Minnesota missed that field goal and Arizona tacked on a field goal and the first touchdown of the game, suddenly it was 19-13 in favor of the Cardinals. But Minnesota, luckily for them, responded right away with their own touchdown. That's super important, right, when you're down like that, to respond right away with a touchdown. It invigorates this team with a lot of life, obviously, to cut down the deficit by that much. Now it's sitting at 19-13. But after that point, after the fact that Minnesota got on the board with their first touchdown, Kyler Murray threw his first interception to start now the fourth quarter, which led to another field goal by Minnesota. So you're thinking, all right, the interception was unfortunate, but you're still leading by 3 points, right? And after the Arizona Cardinals add another field goal, now they're up by 6 points. With about 3 minutes left, Sam Darnold orchestrates an 8-play, 70-yard drive, and it culminates with Aaron Jones having a receiving touchdown there at the end to give the Minnesota Vikings their first lead of the game, now at 23-22. And still, even with the fact that it was a 1-point, game at this point in favor of the Vikings now, Arizona had a good amount of time to only go down and get a field goal with still pretty much all of their timeouts left. They had about 1:13 left, but the last drive did not go at all very good, because after a 5-yard gain on first down, Kyler Murray was sacked and lost 8 yards on second down, so now it's third down, and they take their first timeout, and then Kyler Murray runs for 3 yards on third down, so they use another timeout, and now it's fourth down, right? And because of that, it gets into a spot where it's fourth down, and they desperately need to convert. He kind of just chucks it up, and Shaq Griffin intercepts it, which pretty much just ends the game there. So a pretty inefficient last drive, right, for the Cardinals, and it gave the Vikings this 1-point victory all in all, which is obviously huge for the Vikings because of, winning. They were able to win the turnover battle with those 2 interceptions, and I think the most important thing that I took from this game for mainly the Vikings, because I think this was a huge win for them, obviously, was the fact that their quarterback, good old Sam Darnold, right? The guy that was seeing ghosts, the guy that had a terrible experience in Carolina, the guy that just looked like a backup for the rest of his career, right, in San Francisco, backing them up. He gets another opportunity here in Minnesota with nothing really to lose. Like, he's just the bridge guy. J.J. McCarthy's going to take his job sooner or later. He gets thrown right into the main character picture, right? He gets thrown into that once J.J. McCarthy is out for the entire year. And he has some great performances, right? The Vikings start off hot, but still, people are doubting him, right? People don't look at him as, what was he, the second pick in the draft when he was drafted? People don't look at him like that anymore. They looked at him like a guy that, he was all right. He's closer to a bust than a number 2 overall kind of pick quarterback, right? They still had their doubts. They still doubted whether or not in the biggest of moments Sam Darnold could deliver what we saw over the last couple of games, right? We saw Chicago, how he went like 9 for 9 in overtime and put them in position to win that game against the Bears on the road, much less. And then now this week you get their performance against a pretty keen Arizona Cardinals team that comes in, exciting team, exciting young defense, and they look like they're going to steal one here on your home turf, but he orchestrates another game-winning drive, gives you the lead, and now he's kind of proven it in back-to-back weeks, where I think also it's important to point out where he had an opportunity to kind of show us this back against the Rams, if you guys remember, but they didn't call a clear face mask, and they robbed him of that opportunity to kind of settle all those doubts down like weeks ago. So people still had that doubt up until now, and I think it's great to see Sam Darnold, in these big moments, against one division rival and then another team that's competing with you for playoff spots, right? To go in there, orchestrate these drives, I think it was great to see. And if anybody still has doubts, I mean, you've seen it twice now, right, at this point, and with the supporting cast the Vikings have around them, they are as legit as they come, I think. The NFC North is going to be super fun going forward. The direct head-to-head matchups are coming up, so we should be in for a great couple weeks here coming up. But overall, it was a great win for the Vikings, and we're going to leave it there, right, because of that win over the Arizona Cardinals. But we do have to talk about one more team, one more game, the Steelers defeating the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. A great offensive performance by the Steelers. We're going to go over all of that, and also another disappointing performance by the Cincinnati Bengals defense. So that is coming up in just a few seconds. Don't go anywhere. Back here now for the last segment of today's show. Thank you guys for joining me again for the last segment. But we had to talk about the Steelers game. The Steelers, over the last couple weeks, with the back end of their schedule being piled up with divisional opponents, you have the Chiefs and the Eagles in there. I thought their first big test was against Baltimore, how they were going to handle one of the best offenses in the NFL, and their solution that day was to, win via their defense, right? They have a top-tier defense, and they went out there and proved it. In a low-scoring game, they did enough on offense, and their defense held one of the best offenses in the NFL to 16 points, and they won their game through defense. Now, a couple weeks later, you face another top-tier offense in the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, another tricky divisional opponent, kind of with nothing to lose, like the Cleveland Browns, and this time around, they won in a different way. They went toe-to-toe, point for point, with one of the best offenses in the NFL in Cincinnati, in Joe Burrow, who's having an MVP caliber season. I don't care what anybody says, he can do no wrong for the Cincinnati Bengals. If you had a list of who's to blame for why the Bengals are so bad, he's not even on the list. Out of all 53 guys, that last spot would be for him, but he's not even on it, because that's how far off it isn't his fault for what is going on in Cincinnati. But regardless of that, Joe Burrow did his thing. He scored like what, 4 touchdowns in this game, had over 300 yards, and still Russell Wilson matched them. The offense for the Steelers matched them, and when their defense stepped up against the Ravens, now it was their offense. And I thought that spoke a lot about how, for real, I think this Steelers team really is after a win like that. Of course, despite the awful defense by the Cincinnati Bengals, I think it still doesn't take away that much credit from the Steelers. But overall, the final score was 44-38 in favor of Pittsburgh. Obviously, they rebounded from that loss to the Cleveland Browns in that blizzard, and they responded in the best way possible, right? With a 44-point outing. They hadn't scored that many points since 2018 with Ben Roethlisberger, and now they improve to 9-3 and extend their lead in the AFC North even more with the fact that the Ravens also lost to the Philadelphia Eagles. And now, on the part of Cincinnati, they lose their 3rd consecutive game. Again, despite Joe Burrow having his 5th game this season with over 300 yards and also 3+ touchdowns all in the same game. It's the 5th time he's done that, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's lost probably at least 3 of those games. I didn't check that, but I wouldn't be surprised. But basically, with a performance like that on offense, Russell Wilson matched it just as good as anybody could have by actually throwing for more yards. He threw for 414 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game. It was the 2nd most passing yards in Russell Wilson's career. And I was not expecting that kind of performance at all from him. It was, you kind of maybe hoped that it was like something like that was in there, but I just really thought this Steelers team was going to max at like probably 27 points at most at any point in this season, but they completely outdid themselves in this game. Najee Harris also added 75 rushing yards and a touchdown as well. George Pickens led all receivers with 74 yards and a touchdown, but Pat Freiermuth led all receivers along with Najee Harris with 6 receptions for each of them as well. Pat Freiermuth scored a touchdown. Calvin Austin scored a touchdown as well. So really no wrongdoings from the offense from the Steelers, and even also from the Bengals, right? I mentioned Joe Burrow and how well he did. Chase Brown had 70 rushing yards and a touchdown as well. Jamar Chase, the numbers aren't crazy, like how he played the Ravens or something like that, but he had a touchdown, 86 receiving yards. T. Higgins also a touchdown and 69 receiving yards as well. So not too crazy, but pretty solid overall for the Bengals that only ended up losing this game by 6 points. And the way the game, broke down on itself, there was only 2 punts in the first half, both by Cincinnati, and then everything else was pretty much a touchdown or a field goal. And also, Pittsburgh did strip sack Joe Burrow also in the first half. That helped create the lead, the 27-21 lead that Pittsburgh held at halftime. But in the second half, it was still obviously high scoring, other than the fact that Pittsburgh got a field goal blocked and they punted one time. Everything else still ended up in 7 points or in 3 points. But in the second half, while the Bengals kept coming, the Steelers defense was still able to make a difference with Joe Burrow getting strip sacked and getting it returned by Peyton Wilson in one of the turnovers, and then he also threw an interception as well on a tipped pass. So those kind of moments helped the Steelers gain a big advantage, obviously. But even still, when it was 41-31, the Steelers added another field goal. But still, when the Bengals cut it down to 38-44, I was watching this game and I'm thinking, like, it's way too close for the way the Steelers are playing. It's still way too close. I'm thinking if the Bengals get the ball back when the Steelers had it with like about 2 minutes or so to go in the game, I'm thinking the Steelers are going to lose this game if the Bengals get this ball back, and it's going to look so dumb on the part of the Steelers and their defense. But Luckily for them, Justin Fields was able to go in there, convert on a third down, and that was pretty much it. That iced it. And first, the things I'll say for the Steelers, it's great for them, obviously, to score like that, obviously, especially with what they've had to deal with recently with, like Matt Canada and like the quarterbacks and everything like that, only averaging like 18 points or something for the last 2 seasons, something like that. For them to get a performance like this is super exciting, obviously, but it wasn't all great because, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase were destroying their secondary. Joey Porter Jr., geez, he had such a bad game. He had 6 penalties called on him, and it looked pretty bad when you were watching it live. But Mike Tomlin talked about it today, and he didn't really talk about it too much other than the fact that he mentioned that he doesn't want Joey Porter Jr. to be any less aggressive. So it was definitely a moment where I'm thinking, like, this is clearly the worst game of his career. So that wasn't great, obviously. But still, they were able to get the win. Their front 7 did their thing. But what I will say for the Cincinnati Bengals is you just can't explain too much how bad their defense is. And it's not just the fact that, like, they just have bad players or anything like that. I think it's how we got here from the offseason until now that I don't really like it, or it doesn't really sit well with me, because you look at this defense and they're second to last in total points allowed all year, and they have a 2-4 record when scoring 33 points or more. When you compare it to the rest of the NFL, when they score 33 points or more, they're 52-1. Only one team has lost when they've scored 33 points or more. The Bengals themselves have had 6 games of 33 points or more, just themselves, and they've lost more of those games than they've won. It's pretty insane. And then I think that the main thing with me is when people consider the Bengals contenders in the preseason and things like that, I'm looking at this Bengals team and I'm looking like their defense, their offensive line isn't that much better than like the Ravens, the Steelers, even the Browns, and people are still having the Bengals up there with the Bills, with the Chiefs, with the Texans, and all their star power. And I'm thinking like their team is not looking that great, just compared. The only thing that is going to be a huge, obviously, piece to it is that Joe Burrow is going to come back and he's going to be healthy, right? Everybody kept bringing up the fact that when Joe Burrow plays most of the games, they make it to the conference championship, right? And I think Joe Burrow is that good. I think he is in there with Josh, with Lamar. Patrick is ahead of those guys just barely, but I think he's in there with Josh and Lamar. I feel like I'm missing someone, but it doesn't matter. He's definitely in there with those guys. I think he's that good. Clearly, just with how much he carries this Bengals team, but it just can't all be the fact that it's just Joe. The fact that Joe's there and healthy, that doesn't mean that, forget everything else. Joe's our quarterback, so we're going to make the Super Bowl. That's how it came across when you hear everybody talking about it. And when you look at this team, they didn't have a solid, number 2 corner coming into this year. It was going to be either a safety that was going to play that position or one of their young corners coming in. Not only that, they didn't really add anybody outside of, just Geno Stone, but he really hasn't done too much coming into this year. They lost a guy like Joe Mixon, so despite that, their offense is still one of the best, but they really didn't change too much about this team like the Texans did. Maybe like now you look at the Bills and adding like Amari Cooper or something like that. The Bengals didn't do too much of that other than just the fact that Joe was going to be healthy. And again, I put him in the conversation with Josh and Lamar. Those teams, if you ask anybody on the Bills, they're not just going to say they win just because they have Josh Allen. It all has to be a balance, right? Josh is great. He's awesome. He can win you games, but it's also the running game. It's also their defense. It's also great coaching and things like that. It's also the playmaking that they have around him, right? Same thing with Lamar. Lamar's fantastic as an individual talent, right? But despite all of that, they brought him one of the best running backs in this generation. Plus, on defense, they still got guys like Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton. They traded for Deontay Johnson, even if he's not playing. Still, the effort is still there to still continuously improve, right? Get guys around your best players. Same thing with Patrick. The best player in the NFL has a great defense, has the Chiefs adding guys like Hollywood Brown, drafting Rashee Rice, bringing in Isaiah Pacheco, trading for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, not just sitting on their hands saying, oh, well, we have Patrick, so we're just going to make it to the conference championship, right? It can't just be all on one player, like the Bengals have made it so obvious that it's just all about Joe. And that's really what rubbed me the wrong way, and how it was kind of annoying to kind of just hear the belief that just because Joe was going to be healthy, we're kind of like not going to do anything else. Joe's here, so we're good. He's beaten Patrick in the playoffs before. We're going to get back there. You know, it's going to be great. And I think this season's just proven it even more clearly, right? It's not been good at all. Joe's been great. But the rest of the team, the defense in particular, really hasn't been there. I don't want to go in on Zach Taylor, even though I think there are some question marks there, but it's been just bad planning around it. It's kind of like a bad attitude around it also, just to believe that just because Joe's going to be healthy, that prevents you from really adding pieces around him in some of your weakest areas. So I didn't really like that, and I think they've overvalued just having Joe is simply just not enough. It's not enough for anybody just to have an all-world quarterback. It helps a lot. It kind of distinguishes you in that group of like 4 or 5 teams, but it can't be the only thing. And I think the Bengals kind of overlooked that this season as to their very disappointing season, obviously, this year. So, yeah, the Steelers had a great game, but I think it definitely has a lot to do with the Bengals and how they approach this season. So, unfortunately, it's not looking great for them. They're probably done this year, and hopefully they come back next year trying to really add to this team, not just banking on the fact that Joe's going to play, right? That should be a given, hopefully, right, with a quarterback that stays healthy. But, yeah, I mean, it's crazy the way the NFL and the AFC has kind of played itself out. But that is all we're going to say on that, and that is all we're going to bring to you guys on today's show. Thank you guys for joining me on today's episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. And if you want to see more around this show, check out the YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel, and the GSMC Sports Network channel to catch more coverage around the NFL, breaking news, coverage on each game, all storylines around the league as well. And also, each weekday, join me at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more of these live shows as well. But again, I'm signing off right now. I've been your host, Manny Maradiaga. I'll see you guys back here again tomorrow at 6:30, same time, to discuss more around the NFL.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go